One of the things I love about this job is when I come across one of those crossover media podcast interviews and worlds collide for me. And I always find that really fun. And when I'm out there, I'm scouring the internet for wrestling interviews, and I come across the Dead Meat podcast, which is something that I listen to because I'm a horror fan. And I watch the Kill Count on YouTube with James A Janisse. And so imagine my surprise when I'm scrolling through YouTube and I come across my man with Dead Meat, James A Janisse, interviewing Nyla Rose, the native beast. And she's wearing a Freddy Krueger shirt, and they're talking horror movies. Just great shit. But in this particular clip, Nyla talks about what it's like backstage and the whole creative process in AEW for her when she's filming vignettes or whatever they're doing. Check out this clip.
So do you ever think of like horror villains and bad guys and like draw inspiration or like put yourself in that mindset?
100%. Especially if I'm in the position where I get to direct vignette or you know, something that's, for lack of a better phrase, without breaking kayfabe, a pre-packaged deal. You know, if we're putting something in the can, if I get the opportunity to kind of like lend my artistic eye, if you will, I'm like, what if we shoot it like this? And, you know, we kind of creep around this tree or have the figure already there, but then they move. It's like little notes like that I've picked up from horror movies, every kind of horror movie throughout the ages. Love bringing that kind of stuff to the screen.
I love hearing that you're able to have that kind of creative say in the things that you do. I honestly didn't expect the performers to have that, be able to put their input in as much as that.
It's not always the case. You know, it's not always the case, and definitely not in every company, but creativity is cherished and encouraged at AEW, definitely welcomed. And I probably get on everyone's nerves with like how much hey, can we try this? Can we try this? Let's try one more this way. You know, like what if we like Nyla, we've got other stuff to film. Like, so I'm like, okay, I'll save it for another day. But I'm always thinking of wild ideas.
I like that James was surprised that they have the creative freedom in AEW to do what they want like that. And that's one of the things that I like about AEW. And I know there's a lot of people that will think the opposite, right? That they need somebody in charge of the creative direction altogether that just kind of hands these guys a script and says, go do this. But to me, I think that's what one of the big things that separates them from the WWE. You could argue that being at that level, you're a show. You're a high value, high production show. So you need to have a script and everybody's got to be kind of tightly overseen. But I'm of the impression that I like the variety. I like that you can have that if you want that in the WWE, or you can have the super indie promotion that AEW is. And it really is. And that's where a lot of negative feedback comes for AEW. A lot of the haters about AEW will cite that. That's a big Jim Cornette thing, is that they're just it's the inmates are running the asylum and it's poorly managed and blah, 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 blah. I don't think it is. I think it's really just, hey man, here's my idea for you. Now you guys go ahead and put the story together. You know, you guys go figure out how you want to tell this story. I'll go over it with you. We'll give you feedback. We'll give you my input. We'll craft it into something that makes sense for the show. But ultimately, you're the professional wrestler. You're the artist. You go out and create the content, right? Like if this is a sketch show, like a Saturday Night Live, are we handing comedians a script? Go do this from the writers? Or are the comedians getting together with the writers, with the producers, to come up with their own ideas for these sketches? That's all AEW is doing. And Nyla Rose having that input when she's cutting her promos or doing her backstage vignettes or skits or segments and the stuff that they do on the vlogs and that kind of thing. It's great that they have that creative freedom. It's great that there's that alternative that exists in professional wrestling at a high level, because WWE has no creative freedom. You know, when you go to WWE, you're basically selling out your ability to be an artist to just be a cog in the wheel. You know, certainly I'm sure you have some creative input at some level, especially if you're a bigger star. Like, you know, I'm sure a Roman Reigns has plenty of creative input, and a Brock and a Becky Lynch and Kevin Owens, and a lot of these top stars have that to a certain extent, I would imagine, but not to the level of what they're doing in AEW. And it's, you know, whatever one you prefer, I guess, you know, and everybody's going to have their opinions on how a wrestling company should be ran. But I think it's cool that AEW has that. And I think it was cool that Nyla got to kind of get that word out a little bit, because I think a lot of people are under the impression that WWE is so tightly scripted that that's how wrestling is in general. And I think she kind of blew James's mind a little bit there. And then also I just want to shout out the fact that, hey, my man James A Janisse and Dead Meat Podcast gets a cameo here on the Pro Wrestling Podcast because they were talking a little bit of wrestling with some wrestlers. He's a wrestling fan, James A Janisse is. So if you are a horror fan and a wrestling fan, and you are not familiar with the Dead Meat Podcast, or you're not familiar with the Kill Count on YouTube, the Dead Meat channel on YouTube, go check it out. Check out the horror content and support James A Janisse, because he's a wrestling fan, and clearly he's supporting wrestlers, giving them a stage, giving them a pedestal, giving them a microphone, giving them a voice to talk to people that they don't normally talk to. You know, when wrestlers go on like a Chris Van Vliet always talks to wrestlers. James A Janisse does not. So his YouTube channel is brand new exposure for wrestlers. So awesome shit, good synergy, and just fun to listen to. Worlds collide, baby.
Let me tell you something, brother. You can check out full episodes each and every Sunday right here on this channel, dude. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to take your vitamins and say your prayers, brother.